Let's go again. Go ahead.
Okay, we're here on July 15 with a special guest today, Senator Ralph Alvarado. And we want to talk a bit about Kentucky, what's going on in Kentucky, how some of the national issues are affecting us. And before we even do that, though, I want to ask you, Ralph, for the program, the question I asked you yesterday.
Yeah.
And that is, personally, I've taken a little offense at the money that comes into Kentucky, into political campaigns from out of state, and the influence in our local politics of people on the two coasts here in the middle of America. I think those things ought to be decided by Kentuckians. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure what we can do legally about this, but have you given that any thought?
So, Bob Trott, which is, first of all, it's great to be here with you guys. I appreciate the invitation. Let me start off with that. And it's great to the viewers that are out there watching. When it comes to money in politics, I always tell people that your message is your bullet, and the amount of money is the size of gun you get to fire that bullet with. So you can have a great message, be a 50 caliber, hollow point, thing that can cut somebody in half. If you got a cap gun, you're not going to get that message out there. You can have a very small message and have a lot of that, but have a machine gun, and you could pepper somebody and get the information out there. So money is ultimately, I think the Supreme Court has equated that to free speech. So your ability to raise money is your ability for free speech. Now, when you start talking about politicians out there who are raising funds from outside of Kentucky, I mean, for state races, we have different rules than we have for federal races. So Bob Trott, which was a huge scandal back in the early 1990s, a lot of people went to federal prison over that. We established new rules and very tight caps on funds. We've just expanded the amount of money you can give to a candidate for a state race. We've done $2,000 for local or for state. That's your maximum amount. And you cannot raise more than 50% of your funds cannot come from political action committees or PACs. It's got to come from individuals. So if somebody's relying very heavily on PACs for funding, you've got to catch up with private money to at least have half of that or more. Those are the current rules. On the federal side, though, it's a completely different game. And there's been some attempts at reform for that in the past.
Just to stop for a second,
Yeah.
When you're saying the federal side, you're saying the representatives to Congress and the Senate as well as the president.
Right, exactly. They have much higher limits, but there's been some attempts at reforms for that. But I think they were challenged, and the Supreme Court said, hey, you can't, there's no limits on that. You can get the money from wherever you want. I mean, there's limits as far as the total amount that you can donate. What you'd hate to see in Kentucky, and you'll have people, I've run in races where people will say, hey, more of this money came from outside of the district or from other parts, from other states. And you get people that are, from Hollywood or from Massachusetts that pour money into races here to try to influence races in our state. It's equivalent to me of foreign monies. We worry about influence from other countries. But when you get something from another state, and we're electing somebody from Kentucky to represent our views and our needs here, and you have someone who's funded by other people from the outside, it gives you an inclination they don't have a lot of local support, that there are others trying to influence how things are done here in Kentucky, and I think it's important for us to pay attention to. How successful we can be as far as passing laws to limit that would be tough, because we've tried that. I think we've done that on a federal level. We've tried, and the Supreme Court took it up and said, no, you can't limit it. So it makes it harder, and I think it's just a matter of, once we see it, we need to expose it and let people know. I mean, people don't like to see that.
Yeah, the federal law, McCain-Feingold, that went down partly, at least, on the limitations that a person could spend, especially in the last 90 or 30 days before an election. And it had a provision that an individual couldn't run an ad within a month of an election, which clearly was a violation of free speech.
Right.
This whole thing comes about, of course, Amy McGrath was heavily financed with out-of-state money in her last campaign. It was over 70%. And I just heard recently about a race, I think it was in Utah or Colorado, where one of the candidates is being financed to about 90% by a George Soros group.
Yeah. And that's what gets, it's interesting, and people get around some of this with, you can have political action committees that can set up huge amounts of money and pour a lot of money and do political campaign ads on the side.
And they can still do that despite
sure.
whatever the campaign is. You can't
Sure.
stop that.
Right, exactly. I mean, so a lot of them will do that, and they're not supposed to collaborate or have any kind of collusion with the campaign. If that's discovered, then that's a federal crime, and you can get in a lot of trouble for that. People that violate federal campaign laws, But I think as we start seeing it, it's important to pay attention where people get their funds from. Is it from people outside of the state, people from local races, from local individuals who help you fund your races? you know, those are things we need to expose as we start to see more of that. But yeah, Amy McGrath has been someone who's, I mean, you hear her campaign speeches of what she preaches to people outside the state and says she's one thing and then tries to come back home and say she's somebody different. She has to say that to raise the money from very, very left-wing groups to be able to fund her campaigns, and that's bothersome.
Well, certainly people need to pay attention, because that is one thing we can do. Is
Yeah.
in the end, it is up to the voters. Well, getting back on to what's been happening here, the big gorilla in the room is obviously the COVID-19 crisis, how it's affecting us, the second rise in cases we've had here. We'll get into it. Well, in fact, why don't we just move right on to schools? You're board certified in both internal medicine and pediatrics, right?
Yeah.
MedPeds, which is quite an accomplishment. The American Academy of Pediatrics came out with what I felt, I'm also a physician, I felt was a very strong statement, saying children need to be in school. Children are not at risk. And there have been studies showing that children don't spread the virus, but yet there's all this pushback saying we can't open schools. And everybody's trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. Just some thoughts on that?
So, I mean, this is the third conversation I've had on this topic today, if you can believe that. And
That's
so
the hot topic.
I got a call from a Bourbon County school board member this morning. That's how my day started. A guy that I'm friends with, I go to church with, and struggling, how should we handle that? He sent me a text later on today inviting me to come up to the next board meeting to kind of discuss this very topic. And I'm not a member of the education committee, thankfully, and this is a tough decision to make. But what we're starting to see, it depends on. A lot of countries have already gone through this, and they've, I think Belgium and Iceland and some other countries have done this and done it successfully, having kids come back in. They have not seen spikes, have not seen an increase in deaths. There are other countries that did the masks and social distancing, but got the kids back into school and also saw successful results on that. So there are some who advocate, kids should be able to go to school and should go back to things as normal. There are some who advocate for the masks and distancing, which would be a lot more difficult. We don't have the space for that in a lot of our schools. And you talk to some of the teachers out there, some want to get back in the classroom right away, others are very fearful. They don't want to go back in. So you've got some counties where they're saying, let's go, some saying no. I think Clark County decided to get rid of their fall break and start after Labor Day to give themselves a couple more weeks start. They'll probably end the school year a little bit later into the end of May. But they're going to start a little bit later as well to give themselves a little bit more time to see what's happening in other counties. You got to get kids, ultimately our economy reopening is completely dependent on getting kids back into the classroom and back to school. And I've had some say, well, we'll just do everything from a distance. I go, well, that sounds great. But ultimately, there's parents who are also working from home. So there's people that have one computer in the house, parents who need to work remotely on a computer, and kids who need to go to school on a computer. So who gets to go on the computer? Is it the mom and dad earn a living and put food on the table? Or is it their child who needs to go, to school? You've got some people who live in very remote areas of the state who don't, they can't get Wi-Fi, they can't get good reception. They gotta go to McDonald's to tap into their Wi-Fi to be able to look at a computer screen and do those kinds of things. So that's all a reality of how difficult it is. There are some parents that are worried, and some who are saying, hey, I'm gonna just go ahead and homeschool my kids. I'm done going to public schools. I'm gonna go ahead and do this on my own. And there's a growing number that are looking at that as an option. So all these things become a factor. There are some that are talking about having some kids in the classroom, some at home, all in the same classroom, but some attending remotely, some attending in person. There's all kinds of different mixtures of things coming out. But schools have got to reopen. If we don't reopen the schools, you're gonna be shutting down big portions of the economy because parents can't, they have to. You're limiting your daycares as well. That's been a big fight with the governor also on what's happening. So, if kids got to stay at home, parents need to stay at home. Parents stay at home, they don't work. The economy suffers. It hurts in lots of ways.
Now the viewers can't see me, but they can hear me, which is that's all that matters. I think one of the arguments that a lot of parents are making who have little ones is how do you keep a mask on a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old or
a 6-year-old
or a 6-year-old?
Yeah.
And what happens to these kids who don't keep their mask on?
Right.
When they're in school, they get kicked out. They get sent home, or
lots of questions. Lots of questions.
It's just like, come on.
Well, another major issue is who gets hurt by these policies of trying to go to online education, things like that. It's the poor, it's women. That's where the brunt of this is going to be. And the people who need the education the most, who need the help the most, are the ones who will get the least if we don't get the schools open.
Well, and there's other people besides other people that work at there's our janitors, people that do maintenance at our schools, all of our cafeteria workers, the mechanics who repair all of our transportation, the guys who drive the women who drive the buses. All of those individuals are all part of the system. If you shut all that stuff down, do you let those people go? You're not going to be paying them to do those kinds of services. So there's a cascading effect.
Yeah,
I mean,
there has to be an allowance for that, though.
Yeah.
You know, if we don't have school, those people aren't going to be working.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those people really can't be in that environment. I agree.
Yeah.
You know, we have, if you look at bus drivers and some of the maintenance personnel, there's a higher percentage of older people there who maybe shouldn't be in the schools at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can't go back to work yet. So we got to have a safety net for them, but I think we built that already.
Yeah.
We can't throw them out, and it's going to make it hard to fill some of the teaching spots. Substitute teachers is going to be a real crisis.
Right.
From what I've been hearing, talking to a few people, that a lot of our substitute teachers are actually retired teachers.
Right.
And they're not going to go back into the classrooms.
Right. They're frightened, and I understand. I mean, if you're older, you're at higher risk. We know that with this virus. So your younger teachers are probably not as concerned. The older ones are. There's so many factors to this, and it's going to be a tough decision. I think we got to get back. You know, kids got to get back in the classroom. Ultimately, can you distance? Can you do those things? There's going to have to be some innovative ways of doing it. But again, I know in Clark County they started school a couple of weeks later. I think I talked to some folks in Fayette before I came here. I was helping distribute some food supplies over at Winburn Middle School up in northern Fayette County. They're concerned. They're bringing in mobile units and to accommodate the higher student volumes they have there. And they said we can't distance. Everybody's concerned. I don't know the right answer to that, but I think you got to get kids. You got to get kids back into school. In my opinion, you've got to find a way to do that. Otherwise, it's just too much of a cascading effect for us.
Just human behavior and human development. Children need to be close to other kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's normal human behavior. And if we're going to distance these kids, the questions have been raised. No one has the answer. What will that do to their emotional development?
Sure.
Social distancing all the time for these little children. It's not a normal human situation.
Right.
Never has been in all the existence of human beings on this planet.
Sure.
I think we should just get away from that and try to solve how can we do it? Because the model we had 2 years ago was the right model for teaching for the most part. The curriculum was wrong, but we're trying to do it.
Yeah, but I do think we got to find a way to get kids back into school. If you don't, you're going to lose. Everyone's going to lose a semester as far as.
And the science says it's safe for the kids.
Right.
Don't give me that argument anymore.
Yeah.
It's safe for the kids. The kids are not dangerous to their parents. There are special situations where there's somebody at home that is going to be very vulnerable. I think people are going to know who those cases are. Maybe some of those kids have to be homeschooled.
Yeah.
Be online schooled at home, and we need to provide a safety net for that situation too. There's a lot of these little details. We can do it if we just try. If we try to make it work, we can make it work.
The AAP is not exactly a super conservative organization. It's a pretty left-leaning organization as far as their politics.
I would say it's the most left-leaning medical organization, period.
I think you're right. It probably is, but they also have children's interests at heart. That's their main focus, and for them to say that we should be getting back into the classroom tells you something. And I think we need to. Yeah. We need to from so many angles.
And they've said the kids need to be back in classroom without social distancing and without masks.
Mm-hmm.
They come right out and given those specifications.
Sure.
The CDC really doesn't have as much science behind their recommendations as the AAP does.
Sure. But we have other countries have examples, and I think we can look at what other countries have shown that they've been able to do that successfully without the spikes in numbers, without increased infections or deaths. It's worked. I think it's just, again, there's the COVID crisis has been a mixture of reality and overhype to some degree, and it's a combination of both. And so there's some people are quite worried about things, and we're going to hopefully go over some statistics in our next health and welfare meeting to finally start putting some of this to rest. I've asked specifically for statistics on these infections, influenza, hepatitis A, Hep C. I want all the stuff that we've kind of ignored. I want numbers on suicide attempts, fatal overdoses.
Absolutely.
All this that's been happening that people are ignoring.
Overdoses are increasing.
Oh, yes, 42% increase in Fayette County, fatal overdoses.
That's very important that people need to recognize that the overdoses have dramatically increased across the state and across the country.
Yeah.
And here's a number for you, since you want numbers. this was released yesterday, according to the CDC, for the 2019 flu and COVID season. 30 children, as defined by 18 years of age or less, which I think is on the high side, and most of these deaths are on that high side of it. Now that's an interesting side thing, that we are seeing a lot more teenagers have major complications than young children.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to think about that. But 30 children have died in the United States of COVID-related complications. During that same period, we have the normal influenza season, which we haven't really talked about that much. 160 American children have died.
Yeah.
More than 5 times as many.
Yeah.
Should we be shutting our schools down for the flu? We never have.
Clearly not. Madison County lost a 1-year-old this past year.
That's horrible.
Clark County had a 16-year-old kid die last year from the flu.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it hits at home. We've taken care of people. There's been doctors that I've known that have died from the flu. Just so it's one of those things that I'm going to put those statistics out there. I'm going to ask to put some light on it because the press won't report it. So if we have it before us to say, here are the statistics in comparison, and we can look at direct, influenza related and then direct influenza deaths, COVID related and direct COVID deaths, and be able to compare those.
That's the right way to approach it. I'm sure they're going to look upon you as the expert on this.
And I think we just need to put the stats out there because we hear about it in different, it gets so confusing because there's numbers that are thrown out and people are relying on CDC numbers, which may not be up to date numbers that we have right now in the state.
A little bit lagging.
Yeah, so we got to put that out there.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. We've talked a little bit about recovery and reopening. When I look at that, and you look at the risk, we've had more cases. We haven't had more deaths. Mm-hmm. We're still doing better there, but we are having quite an upswing right now, like a lot of states. And the governor has mentioned that he might need to shut things down again or back us up a little bit. My own opinion is people aren't going to do that.
Right. And I've had a chance to talk. I haven't talked to the governor. The governor has not talked to the General Assembly at all. And when he was asked about that, he says, I don't have to. I'm not required to by law. And this is a governor who came in saying he's going to set a new tone in Frankfurt and all this is going to be nicer and better. And clearly the only tone we're getting is a dial tone because he doesn't talk to us. So I get frustrated with that. I'll tell you, I've talked to the Secretary of the Cabinet. We've had a couple of meetings. There hasn't been a lot of proactive, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? It's more or less, do you have any questions? And I go, well, I don't know what to ask you because you guys are issuing regulations without even checking with us. When we have meetings with the Secretary, I typically during session have said, here are the bills we're running coming up next week, just so that you know what's coming. If you have any issues with these, let us know ahead of time so we can prepare. Here's a bill that you may not like. What changes would you like to see? And I've been soliciting feedback from, the cabinet to see what they like, and they've been able to give me feedback on some. We made changes to bills, others we may not have, and they ran through anyway. But when it comes to regulations, there's been they're not interested in our feedback. And I said, look, a lot of the things you're doing are illegal. And the courts have determined that. He's gone through 7 different lawsuits already. There's about 10 or 11 more coming. But 7 lawsuits from citizens for violation of civil rights and what he's been doing. The courts have determined that, yes, these are a violation of civil rights, ultimately. All 7 of them. And, there's legal and illegal ways. Now, maybe the ends of what you want to get done, I might agree with you and say, yeah, we want to get to this place. You want to have people do this for you. Great. There are legal ways of doing that, and there are illegal ways. And they're choosing illegal ways and saying, well, the ends justify the means. And that's a very scary place to go, especially when it comes to a violation of people's civil rights, to say, I know what's best for you. I know what's best for you. I know what, I'm here to protect you. We've heard that from how many banana republics around the world where leaders say, I'm doing this for your benefit. It's to protect you. That's why we put people in Japanese concentration camps in this country, is to protect these individuals because we don't want you to get hurt. So we're going to do something to violate your civil rights. I mean, those are the kind of things we've seen people argue all over the world since the beginning of time. And in this country, we said, we're not going to do those things. And here we have someone saying, I'm doing this for your best interest. I'm trying to save your life, but I'm going to go ahead and violate your civil rights in the process. Frightening, scary, rubs me the wrong way. And if they had just come to us for feedback, we'd say, this is probably not a good idea, and here's why. If you want to do something, we can show you how to get it done, properly, legally. They're not interested in that feedback. So it's been frustrating. And we're trying to get, at least some of the things done. But as the numbers continue to increase, I don't think it can go backwards. I think people saw the governor when he was saying it's too dangerous to go to church, and he's still saying a lot of those kind of comments. It's too dangerous to go out without a mask. It's too dangerous for all this. But if there's a massive political rally on the Capitol steps and he gets to go speak and shake hands and have his mask off, well, that's important. Those are his words. That was important. That's okay. There's no backlash. There's no tongue lashing for that being illegal. It's what's good for thee is not good for me. And people see that and go, that's it, I'm done. And I think he's lost a lot of the public as a result. And to go backwards now is going to be really tough.
I think that something that people need to pay attention to that gets lost in the media and in the information that's getting put out, and something that I've been focusing on myself, is the percentage of those tested who are tested positive. And I've seen the Herald Leader put out some numbers, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, to where it showed back to like the beginning of June and where we are now. Like a 3% of those getting tested was being tested positive. Now it's like a little bit over 4% who are being tested or testing positive. So not much change, even though the cases are going up to 400s. You know, we hit 5 one day, I think the other day or whatever. It's only been a 1% difference in the change as far as being tested and positive. I want to see what the numbers were back in March and April when testing first began. Because you could imagine if we were hitting 220, 230 back at the end of March, beginning of April, with very limited testing. Imagine what the numbers were back then if we had the testing capability that we have now.
Right.
So actually, I would believe if they would show us the numbers from back in March and the beginning of April, we're probably still in an actual pretty good situation right now compared to where we were then.
Right.
If you look at the numbers based on per population and per testing.
We also had some testimony from the rural health trying to think of the exact term for them, but they were the Medical Association for Rural Health in the state, effectively. And they came and provided some nice testimony last month. And they've been testing people for antibody levels to determine if they've already got antibodies present. And they had a kind of a limited cohort, probably 250 to 300 people. About half of them had positive antibodies in their system, which I found very interesting. And I said, okay, they're out in rural parts of the state, but if they had about half, how does that translate? You can't really expound that into the entire state probably, but it would suggest that a pretty good portion of the population already has some kind of immunity to this, or at least has an antibody level. And I've been talking to the cabinet a little bit saying, when do we start doing antibody testing? Well, we want things that we can rely on as far as those results. There are some companies that have tests that you can, it's like a finger stick. You put in a couple drops of solution, you let it run. It's like a little electrophoresis thing that runs through there, and it tells you if you have an IgM or IgG antibody or if you're totally negative. They claim to be FDA approved and ready to go, which I think would make more sense to determine if somebody's already had it and they're already done. But I've also told the governor too, not the governor, the secretary of the cabinet, a lot of people don't want to know. I mean, they're almost to the point that if I find out, I get shut down for 2 weeks. So there's people roaming around out there who probably been exposed, probably young people who think, I'm not going to say anything. I can't do this. I can't go somewhere. I can't work. So people are fearful of getting checked out. And you're getting younger people now that are coming forward saying, I might have a symptom, I better get tested and that sort of thing. And again, it's the overall percentage of people I've asked for those numbers to say how many people have been tested and how many have come back positive. Of those that are positive, what are our death rates? We start getting an actual idea of what the numbers look like. Yeah. There's too much confusion about it.
Because regardless, if you think about it, considering it, I think he said, correct me if I'm wrong, if someone watching this wants to comment with the actual numbers, they have them. But I think we've done over close to 500,000 tests so far in Kentucky. I think it's over 400,000 tests so far. So you got 24,000 cases now, 25,000 cases out of almost 500,000 tests.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing pretty good. And you consider you have 24,000 total cases compared to a population of over 4 million people. And another thing too that I've noticed that I don't like is that he underreports, Governor Beshear, the recovery numbers.
Right.
Because if you look at the recovery numbers that are issued out by the health departments on social media every day, all of them, I can't find one yet that is sitting under 50%.
Yeah, the recovery numbers are just worthless.
Right.
In my opinion.
But what I'm saying is that, like Montgomery County, for example, I think we have, at the moment, 22 cases. I think we have 69 who have recovered. I think Powell County's 8 and 8 at the moment, right at 50%. But the numbers he puts out, I mean, it's way off.
Yeah.
It's way under 50%. And why is he doing that? That's what I want to know.
They don't follow these people up. That's expensive and time consuming. They just don't do it. And it's just like, who do we test? In medicine, we talk a lot about selection bias, which is where when you're testing people for something, if you pick the people who are likely to have whatever you're looking for, you're going to find a higher percentage than if you just do it randomly. And we have tremendous selection bias in who we're testing. So the levels probably are lower, although, gosh, you do the antibody testing and you find out that all these people have antibodies already.
Yeah.
We don't really know how much of that's going on, and we need to know that.
Yeah, and it's a matter of a reliance on a test to say, are these reliable tests? Are they going to give us reliable results? We don't know. Spot checks for antigen tests like we're doing now for testing, people can get tested 3, 4, 5, 6 times. That's just right now. Tomorrow you could be positive. I do a lot of the nursing home world, and for our nursing home patients, they all get tested until they're negative so they can be taken out of isolation. So we've got one of the nursing homes I've got has got an area that's completely, got plastic on, everything's isolated, their food comes in a separate entrance. The staff that are either positive or have been positive are the ones who are providing care for those people. They have to have 2 negative tests subsequent to that in 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks with 2 negative tests, they're released and they're called negative. But there's plenty of stories, people who did that, had renewed symptoms, come back with another positive, so they never really fully got rid of it.
So let me ask you a question, because I heard this too. I'm going to ask you if you all heard the same thing. Let's say I test positive for COVID, and 2 weeks later they test me again to see if I'm clear of it or if I still have it. If I still have it, does that get labeled as another positive test?
No, it should. Well, I don't know how they're tracking that.
Right.
It would still be. It shouldn't. It should be the same person. You just now it's a matter of are you clearing or not. So I don't know if they're tracking. That'll be a good question to ask them in committee. But I don't think they are.
I would hope not.
Yeah, I don't think they are.
It would be unethical. You know what I'm
sure.
saying?
I don't think they're tracking it as a new positive, and that would be the thing to ask them for, is just to say, But there's been cases of people that have been positive. And they feel better and they get negatives, and then they say, I got another fever, I feel crummy again, go back to their doc, get tested a 3rd time after they've had 2 negatives, and they're positive. And they go, well, you knew you had it, we thought you had gotten over it, you still have it, and it's not a reinfection, it's got to be the same one. You're not going to get a reinfection of the same virus. And so there's been those cases out there too that are kind of weird and why they happen. But it's been an interesting, and I'm also going to go over death certificates and how those are filled out, because the department, people don't know how those are filled out. We fill them out, and there's contributing causes and the main cause of death. And I've had a couple of patients that in the nursing homes who COVID is what got them, and they had COVID and they had other contributing factors, but they got COVID, they got a fever, they started getting their problems. The family said, "You don't want anything done. Do not resuscitate." And they expired from that, and that's what got them. So those are direct, that's what they died from, respiratory failure due to COVID-19. But then there's others that, may have had that as a side thing, and maybe they had, some other problem. The thing is with COVID, we don't know, there's a lot of theories that there's cardiac issues. You get hypercoagulable, so you have a higher chance of forming clots, so that strokes and heart attacks can be more likely because of COVID. We just don't know. We're learning all these things from it now, and it makes it really hard to track the data to know what's direct, what's indirect. And that's partly what we're reporting now is COVID-related deaths to cover all those. So it's difficult. It's just a tough time. But we want to just get accurate data from the states. What we're hoping to do.
Let's switch for a second and get back to the governor and these executive orders. And I understand the emergency law that was put in place. I think it was in 2015. Is that right?
No, it was 1998.
1998. I'm sorry.
1998.
Wow.
It was because I think it was, and I wasn't there at the time, but you guys probably remember back in 1994 we had a massive ice storm here in Kentucky, shut the state down. It gave the governor, I think, an ability to handle things when it came to floods, tornadoes, natural disasters, to say I can declare an emergency and handle things more efficiently. That was the purpose of this. No one has ever declared an emergency this long. He's declaring all kinds of emergency regulations with things that are not even related. But just I got to get this done right now because I want it right now. So it's an emergency, and I got to get emergency contracts. So with Jefferson Davis takedown, which, that's been debated for years. The decision was made by the commission, the historical commission, saying let's go ahead and remove it. He was in such a hurry to get that done. It's got to happen tomorrow. No bids. One company, the spouse of the owner of that company just happened to give heavily to his campaign and had a big contract to remove this without any clearance. Those are things that are concerning, enough to the point where the legislative committee that oversaw it is referring that to the U.S. Attorney's Office and to the Attorney General for review. So there's stuff like that that's been happening, but you give him emergency powers in 1998. No one's ever done what he's done with this. It's highly disturbing. He's been sued by his citizens, he's losing the appellate cases, all in the name, I'm doing this to protect you. And again, lots of tyrants have used that excuse and done things illegally to their citizens as well. So the ends do not justify the means. I agree with mask wearing. People should do that. I agree with a lot of the things that there's things that they want to get done that are medical issues that I might agree with, but the process does matter and how you get a lot of these things done. And I think we're going to be looking at taking a lot of those powers away from him in the near future.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. I know that when you guys go back in session, there's already been talk by, is it Maddox, I believe, and HB, I can't remember the number.
BR 130.
BR 130.
I'm preparing a bill as well. I've talked to the Senate. I've asked him to run it. Yeah, I haven't read hers. I think she gives him a week's worth of emergency powers. Now, here's the concern I've got. So, there's going to be legitimate reasons or times you're going to want the governor. Let's say if we're not in session and there is a massive flood in the state or massive tornadoes that come through and destroy a bunch of communities. Yeah, exactly. Right. But let's say it blankets and it hits a huge swath and nails a big chunk of the state. If you're going to give them 1 week's worth and you can't call any more without calling the General Assembly and we're not in, maybe a lot of those legislators can't even get out of their communities. You have an ice storm that shuts down the state. You can't even get on the roads to get to Frankfurt. So now you're no emergency powers and you can't get the General Assembly there to even call them into session. That can become a problem. So for me, I thought we'll give you 30 days of consecutive emergency days, and then anything, if you want to call, either extend that or I'm going to give them another 15 days in reserve. So you get 30 days. If you want to use those 15 reserve days, you can, but when they're gone and something else happens, they're gone. And the blame is going to be on you for using up your emergency reserve days. Otherwise, you got to call us. You got to basically ask permission from the General Assembly, or the emergency automatically ends after 30 days. And that way, it'll give them plenty of time to handle anything that's ugly there. But something like we're experiencing now would not occur. The other thing we got to do too, I think, is be able to call ourselves into special session. I think there's one state, I want to say it's Utah, that can call themselves into special session only during an emergency. So that you can't do it otherwise, but if there's an emergency like this, they have the ability to call themselves in, regardless of what the governor thinks. So it kind of takes the power away from him, because right now he's the only one who can call us into special session. So we're looking at all those changes. I think you'll see all of that stuff come down the pike.
The mask mandate, I think that the big problem with the mask mandate is just that the forcible nature behind the mask mandate and not giving the businesses the option. No one's forced to walk into my business. You know what I mean? And so, I think that's where the aggravation comes from with the mask mandate. And we went all the way from March to the beginning of July. And now all of a sudden we're having this mask mandate in the middle of summer when it's 100 degrees outside. Yeah. And you're forcing businesses to do this and do this and do this instead of giving them the option, because no one's forced to walk into a business. Yeah,
I'll tell you where we're going to find it deficient, I suspect, because he puts in penalties, monetary penalties, without due process. So if you go speeding down the street and you get a ticket, you have due process. You go to court, you have to go before a judge, here's the penalty, here's the fine, whatever. In this, it's basically, I'm going to make you do something. And if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to issue a monetary fine in an increasing amount. So what if you have a reason for not doing that? You have an argument and nobody wanted to hear it, basically, and you've got your ticket from the health department saying, here's your penalty for not doing what we told you to do. Where's your recourse? Are you going to go hire a lawyer and go to court over you? You're not going to do that for $50 or $100, whatever it's going to be for the fine. It's a due process issue.
Right.
And what I've told, I'm going to use this probably as allegory kind of in a method too, is, again, if I agree with wearing masks. People should wear them. I encourage people to do it. But let's say my children are starving. Okay, I couldn't get my unemployment insurance checks. My kids are starving. They need $200 for food, and you've got $200. There's legal ways of me trying to get the money from you. I could say, can you please give me $200? And you could say, sure, here you go. Or I could say, hey, look, I'm a proud person. I want to earn that. Can I do something? Can I earn the $200 from you? Yeah, do these things around my house, mow my yard, I'll give you $200. Or give me a loan and I'll pay you back. Or I can put a gun to your face and say, give me $200. Now, 3 of those things are legal. 1 of those things is illegal. The ends, we all agree the kids need to eat. I'm doing this so the kids can eat food. You can commit a crime to give the food, But some people would say, what's the big, the kids need to eat. Who cares if we did that to you, You're saying, hey, look, I got a gun put to my face and my rights were violated. That's illegal. That's kind of the same, to me, the same kind of thing we're talking about with this is, You're putting in things that violate our due process laws, things that are illegal in how you're getting them done. Now, if you just said you're going to wear a mask, no penalties with it, you could say, okay, well, we can issue you a citation. I'm getting too excited here.
Okay.
Issue you a citation for it. But I mean, that's the stuff that I look at and I go, that's the right way to do things, not do things illegally. It bugs me to my core, when you start doing things, getting around the law and saying, I get to call all the shots, I'm the king, and to heck with the legislature, I'm even going to consult with the legislature. Boy, that bugs me to death. And it's just wrong. And people are just acting like, what's the big deal? That's what this country was founded on, is to avoid that kind of dictatorial power.
Yeah.
So there's a proper way. Masks, yes, we all agree. The kids need to eat food. Don't rob somebody to get the food to them. Ask somebody that will help you get that food legally. And that's what could have happened here, but there's just no desire to collaborate with the General Assembly. Everything's done because they claim we have emergency king-like powers, and that's just wrong.
But we have the potential for something that's going to really concern a lot of people on that issue, and that is, when we get a vaccine, will the governor be able to mandate that you have to get the vaccine?
Yeah, and I've spoken about this before, right?
I believe in vaccines,
yes,
but
yeah,
we don't know as much about this one.
So here's the line, and that's always the fine line between, and again, people, when they talked about it here, I'm a pediatrician. I can't tell you how many people to get vaccinated. The American Medical Association has a code of ethics that we as doctors are supposed to abide by. It's in our state law that we have to abide by that. And if we violate that code of ethics, we could be violating our conditions to be doctors in the state of Kentucky. There's an entire section on people that, that we say, hey, we think we know what's right for you for your healthcare treatment. And we could recommend that. And if a patient says, no, I don't want to do that, how we handle that. Nowhere does it say you go to the government and tell the government, this person that won't do what I tell them to do, make them do it for my benefit and for the people's benefit. Nowhere does it say that. We should just say, why are you fearful of doing this? Why don't you want to? Here's the proof that I have. And you're supposed to discuss it, not humiliate them, not do anything in that regard. That's what we're supposed to ethically do as doctors when it comes to vaccinations or any kind of medical treatment. Now, if you have a disease state and you're saying, I refuse to get treatment, and I'm going to go out and basically use it as a weapon. So that's where tuberculosis comes in. If you have COVID-19, I'm going to go out and cough on people. Yeah, that you're crossing the line for me. That's a weapon. You have active disease and you're going to give it to other people. You can't do that. Government can come in and say, okay, we're going to either force you to take treatment or do something to not infect other folks. TB, we've seen people actually forced into detention to get treatment for tuberculosis so you don't spread that around. But for prevention, I kind of draw the line at prevention, and vaccines are preventative measures that you don't want someone to get that for the sake of everybody. Now, should we be vaccinating everybody? We should. Everybody should get their vaccines. There's things you can do for prevention's sake, but you can't force someone to take a treatment for prevention they don't want. I tell people this example, and it's kind of a little comical maybe, and I don't mean it to be that way, but there's HIV and there's STDs and lots of things that are transmitted sexually. What should you do? You should wear a condom. You should use prophylaxis to prevent the spread of that disease. You could have it, not know it, and give something to somebody else. Do we mandate that you have to wear prophylaxis if you're sexually active and single? No, I don't know who would police that, but you don't put a law in the books saying that you have to do this. It's the same concept, and there are lethal diseases you can catch in that manner, but we say, hey, look, here's a public service announcements. Make sure you have protection. Make sure you don't give it to other people. Here's what can happen. And that's how we have to approach vaccinations as well. It would be a good idea. You don't want to get this thing. It can, if you catch it and you're older, there's a serious risk of dying from it, but I don't think you can force anybody into taking a vaccination. There are some states who have got that on the books. I think California had proposed a law that if people wouldn't give their kids vaccinations, they would be charged with negligence, charged with the crime of negligence, and kids taken away and forcibly given vaccines against their parents' decisions. I can't do that, and my code of ethics says you can't do that. I have a hard time with that. So that's the interesting part, is people think, well, there is a fine line between public health and benefits and individual freedoms when it comes to this stuff, and there's a line there that I have in my own mind of where I set that line, but I don't know that you can force people into taking preventative measures. You can't.
So if this issue is brought before the state legislature, it's going to be debated, and you're going to talk about those ethics, and a lot of people are going to come to the table. But what happens if the governor says it's an emergency and I'm going to come down with this as an edict? I mean, I think that's clearly illegal, and we could face that.
Well, and I think what you're seeing is again, a lot of people have been educated on state government this year because they say, why aren't you doing something? Say something, do something. And I go, we follow the Constitution, right? We took an oath and we have to follow what it says and follow our laws, and we're not allowed to do that until January. Some say, well, he's breaking the law, he's violating civil rights, you should just go ahead and do it too. I go, no, you don't want to do that. I don't want to descend into that level. I just don't believe in that. But I think come January, you're going to see major changes on that. If he does do that, I think you're going to see citizens probably file suit against him saying, you don't have the authority to make me do this. And I think they'll win. I mean, he's lost every case. This is a guy who used to proudly say he was the chief law officer of the state and should know better. But clearly when, he's just doing things all in the name of, I'm here to protect you, but I'll violate your civil rights in the process. Wow, that should frighten everybody. It really should.
Well, President Obama held himself out as a constitutional professor or authority. And he had 12 cases go before the Supreme Court, and all were decided against him by 9-0 votes.
Yeah, so
people get arrogant.
Yeah, and I think, again, this governor could have handled things so much differently. He could have engaged leadership in the House and Senate and say, hey, here's what I'm looking at doing. What do you guys think? Give me your feedback. He could take it or not, but at least to solicit that. Again, I serve in health and welfare. I'm the Senate chairman. All the health and welfare bills come before me, and I decide what gets heard in our committee. When I make a decision of what I want to hear, I sit down with the cabinet, who are members of a governor who's politically opposed to me, and say, here's what we're planning on hearing. You guys have any issues with this? Anything you want? We don't like this. We're opposed to this. Would you like to see anything changed in this? Give me your feedback. There were big bills that made it through the House, that got to the Senate, had a lot of opposition. I sat down and said, give me all of the things you want to see changed in this. And they provided that for me, and I started adopting those changes. The bill never got through because of COVID, but I had those discussions because I want to have good governance, and I want to get feedback and input. And there's some things I probably can agree with, some things I might not, but at least you get that feedback. To sit and say, I know what's best, and his circle is very small, that doesn't lead to good government, and it leads to this. I know what's best for you. I'm here to protect you all. I'll do what it takes. Some people like that, and there's a lot of us who don't. And it's frightening.
Well, if you listen to the United States Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he makes a lot of his decisions based on precedent. And every time that a governor in any state makes decisions like are being made here and in other states,
that's right,
they're establishing precedents that will still be there when the emergency's over.
That's right.
That's one of the real concerns here.
That's right. And you'll say, well, someone else did it, and you didn't think it was a big deal. So. Again, we had a famous bill that a lot of people have, a couple of years ago that we passed to fix the pensions. And they got sued over the process, saying the process wasn't legal. That process has been used for decades on lots of bills, from CARA to budgets to all kinds of stuff. No one had an issue. They didn't like it on this issue, and the courts have decided, yeah, you can't use this process anymore to pass a bill. So all those previous bills were at risk, if anybody ever wants to sue to undo them. But we can't use it anymore going forward. So they said, well, the ends didn't justify the means. So that was good for that. But for this, a lot of those same individuals that have been critical of that are saying, well, we need to do this, so who cares? What's the big deal? It's because, again, the ends don't justify the means. The process matters. It matters on how you do it to make sure it's legal. And when you have federal and states and now appellate judges saying, yeah, you can't do this. Civil right is a big deal. I mean, people have fought long and hard in this country to make sure those get defended. And a lot of people right now are just like, they don't care because they agree with the ends, so it doesn't matter how you get there. And it really does. In this case, yeah.
Speaking of civil rights, I want to switch topics just for 1 second because it's an important issue in the state and it's on the national news every other day. And that's the Breonna Taylor situation in Louisville.
Yeah.
I know a lot of downtown businesses in Louisville are concerned and worried that at any moment, Louisville could be destroyed downtown. Yeah. And, what happens? And have you heard anything in Frankfurt? Is there anything being discussed as far as like planning or has Governor Beshear talked about anything as far as protecting the downtown area if no charges are brought? Which I think if people read the facts about the case, it was a very unfortunate situation.
Yeah.
But personally, I don't believe that they're going to press murder charges on the officer. If that happens and riots break out, is there any plans to protect Louisville?
So nothing has been brought in Frankfurt that I'm aware of, not before any committee or any discussions. I know there was, I think President Stivers just proposed a bill to start limiting no-knock warrants.
Yeah.
They said in that situation, there was no need for it. It was like 1 a.m. There wasn't probably a need for a no-knock warrant at that hour. And so they're going to change the process of how those get done. It's got to be through a court order. It's not going to be in the middle of the night, all those kinds of things. So I think they're changing that process. There was a bill that's been pre-filed now to have that discussion. So I think it's going to lead to some reforms in that regard. And the police departments have, I think, and there's a lot of people that are actually very conservative who agree with that. They're worried about somebody just rushing into your house and having some of that done. So there's going to be either very, very, very limited times when that gets done, or and almost eliminate all the opportunities for those going forward. But downtown Louisville right now is a ghost town. Things are not, economically it's been destroyed. A lot of people moved in that area because they had their businesses, they live above it, and they thought, hey, I'm going to be here doing, and now they don't know what they're going to do. So I'm the executive committee for the National Conference of State Legislatures, NCSL. It's a huge conference. That there's a big, massive one every year. I managed to land that for Louisville for 2024. I'm worried because it was going to be 4th Street Live and the new convention center and all these really cool things and stuff on the river, and it would show off Kentucky, show off Louisville for the rest of the country. We've got 4 years, but I have to raise funds to help do that, and a lot of things I got to do to make that happen. I'm a little worried now if things get trashed or even things get worse there. So there's a lot of concern. I don't think anything has been proposed. The mayor there has not done a good job, and people are asking for his resignation in Louisville. I don't know what Mayor Fisher is going to do, if he needs to step down or not. The police department there, the morale is horrible in Louisville right now too. A lot of people are looking at retiring, and you're seeing that happen in Lexington also. A lot of officers saying, I'm done, I'm getting out, and they're getting out of law enforcement. So I don't know, I'm worried about it. I know people that live there that are looking to move out of there because they don't live that far from downtown, and they're concerned about things spilling over. But I don't know what's going to happen. We did have a bill proposed for no-knock warrants that's going to limit those. That's about the extent of what I've heard so far. So it's going to, I just hope things, I'm a little worried after November overall that our country hopefully stays in a peaceful situation. I think a lot of people are worried about that right now.
Sure. On no-knock warrants, we did a show on this a couple years back even, or on some of the police overreaches or the things police sometimes do that become controversial. There's no-knock warrants that go bad. Mm-hmm. That we have a couple times a year when they carry it out at the wrong address.
Yeah. Things
like that. And a number of policemen have been killed trying to carry out a no-knock warrant because whoever is there, whether it's the perp that they're looking for or an innocent bystander victim, defended themselves.
Yeah, sure.
What would you do if all of a sudden a bunch of people in dark clothing were suddenly breaking into your house? Most people who have the ability are probably going to lift up a gun and shoot back.
Sure.
And that happens. Yeah. And it puts our officers at risk too. And I think back to the Branch Davidians in Waco and how we knew that David Koresh went to have breakfast at McDonald's at the same time every morning, jogged over there in tennis shoes and gym shorts, and could have been apprehended there all by himself,
right,
unarmed. Instead, they confronted him at his compound, and all these people got killed.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think in this situation,
sometimes
in the situation, they said wasn't probably a reason to have to go in at 1 a.m. to do that.
Right. This guy probably could have been apprehended in a much safer manner.
Right. So there's things that we're learning. Obviously, there's and I think we're going to try to correct some of those in this bill that's been proposed, and it's a bipartisan effort, which is good to see. But I don't know, Louisville right now, it's really distressed. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm fearful, and
I have some friends from that area who have been talking about just the disaster it's turned into.
Yeah, I just started a business in that area.
Yeah, well, and people are proud. People live in Louisville are proud. They've been there for generations.
And it's been making progress.
Yeah.
It's been turning into a beautiful city.
It really has.
And now, boom,
yeah.
Look at this mess. Yeah. I did have one other thing we could switch to, which is a whole lot different. And you just say so if we shouldn't go into this. Because, there is one reason to maybe not say too much.
Yeah.
I just recently learned about what appears to be an organized effort to harass members of the state legislature with telephone calls at all hours of the day and night. And
that's been going on for a while. So Joe Bowen, who's he's no longer in the legislature, but he had a business that had his last name on it. He sold it, and somebody got a hold of his cell phone and they started calling at all hours of the night and harassing him. They went and protested at his former business. He was no longer the owner, and people saying let's boycott the business and doing all this cancel culture stuff that you hear about. And he goes, I don't even own that place anymore. It's got my name on it, but I sold it a long time ago. So. The Attorney General just had that happen at his house a couple of days ago. He had a bunch of people on his lawn sitting out. 87 people got arrested. And that's over near, again, Louisville in that area. So, it's there's people that do that stuff. It's unfortunate.
There are laws.
Oh, yeah, there are.
It kind of looks like there is a conspiracy here, not just random people doing this, but that they're organized in some way. It is how it looks. I can't prove that.
Well, these 87 people that were over there, they're going to get charged with a Class D felony.
And they should.
Yeah.
There are proper ways to seek redress and protest and everything else, and I'm all for everybody having their day to speak out.
Sure.
Let people know when they disagree with them, but we can't be trampling on other people's rights over that.
There's been lots of stories. I mean, I'll give you an idea. Julie Adams lives in Louisville. This is prior to this, about 2 years ago, had her back door broken into. There's a lot of people have had things put in their yard. I mean, there's been a lot of that stuff for a lot of legislators that and other public officials that people want to take that out. But you're right. I mean, there's a peaceful process in this country and in the state on how to handle that. One of them is elections. People don't like it, they can vote you out, and that's how people can do that stuff. And I think there's also
but these things happen, and people won't run for office because of it.
Right, you're right.
Good people who want to serve the public say, I'm not going to take that on. I'm not going to put my family through that. I'm not going to risk my home.
Yeah.
And that is bad for America.
It is. Yeah, it is. And there have been people that have expressed that same concern, saying, I don't want to put my family through all that stuff. I just don't want to.
I've tried to recruit people to run for office, and that's one of the things that comes up very quickly. Is the harassment that goes on today. You didn't used to hear that. It's a problem now.
Yeah. Well, and it's, again, America's changing, and some of the things not for the better, unfortunately, and it's...
But free speech is the most important freedom we have in America,
right.
And that's what this is about, is trying to crush that.
Yeah, you're right. Scare people out, wear them down, let you're right. I mean, Donna Mayfield, our state rep in Clark County, she quit famously during a primary a couple of years ago, just saying it's gotten too nasty. And I was talking to her husband, and he said, I come home every night, she's crying, didn't. And it was people that were friends of hers that, turning and just doing nasty, and the social media stuff and all of that, it just kind of blew up. But again, she was great, very popular. Decided it's not worth the aggravation anymore. I'm just getting out. And people, she used to win her elections handily, but you're seeing a lot of that. I think people are, if you listen to social media, you watch a lot of that, it gets so rough there. So even I put a post and people will go in and I just let them rant. I don't even respond anymore because it's just, you can't. It's just not, it's not even almost an opportunity to have an interaction. It's people just want to trash you on there, okay, and they insult you and do their different things, and you get to the point where you just kind of take the insult and let it go and just know that I'm doing the right thing, and if the moment comes people are tired of me, they're going to vote me out, and I go home, and that's okay. I go back to my job, and that's what I do. It's the beauty of a part-time legislature is you got people that have to go home and listen to their constituents, and they'll tell you pretty quickly. And there's certain people that I'll talk to that will ground me pretty quickly if I'm doing something wrong or they think I'm doing something improperly. They'll come in and say, hey, this is wrong, Ralph. You got to think about this. Okay, and then that kind of puts it fresh on my mind. So, but yeah, you're right. I think if people start to come to your house and threaten you, that's scary. Yeah,
no elected official deserves that kind of thing. Yeah. Let me bring up something else that's very different. Mm-hmm. And probably the most frightening comment I have heard from a politician, maybe ever, was something Joe Biden said in the past week, which was that he wants to put an end to shareholder capitalism.
Yeah.
And that basically is what took the world from being ruled by kings to being ruled by people. That was what began it, when all of a sudden people could come together and start a business that none of them could do themselves. No enterprise was undertaken anywhere in the world that wasn't authorized by a king until the idea of forming a corporation was created.
Right.
It's really incredible what it's done for the world, the wealth it's created, the democracy that's risen from it. and he says he wants to put an end to it. And I've been thinking about what all does he mean? And the reason I brought this up with you, Ralph, is Joe Biden, back in the 90s, or it might have been the early 2000s, before, when he was still in the Senate, he brought up a proposal to help with the national debt that's been used elsewhere called the Argentine solution. Your father's from
I'm familiar with the Argentine
right?
solution, sure.
Yeah, so you know about
You
this.
just keep cutting off the zeros off of currency, and who cares? They devalue their currency. I mean, also, don't get me started on Argentina. So
Well, there was something else they did besides just rampant inflation. The Argentine solution really was, they took all of the savings people had, IRAs, pension plans, bank accounts, and they said, well, that can't be that way anymore. You have to give all of that to the government, and we'll give you an IOU, and the government will hold your money, and it'll still be your money, except you can't have it.
yeah.
And they finance the government that way.
Let me tell you what, there'll be a war in this country if it gets to that point. Argentina's a mess, unfortunately, and my mom's from there. My aunt still lives there. Yeah, my aunt still lives there. We keep
It's
in
a
touch.
beautiful country.
Beautiful. I mean,
In 1904, it was the fourth richest nation in the world.
So after World War II, they had the second highest gold standard in the world. Why? Because they sold all their natural resources are enormous. They should be one of the
And still
wealthiest
are.
countries. It still is. Tons of cattle. They have a grain galore. They have
Beautiful
petroleum,
climate.
all kinds of stuff. Those guys sold all their resources to the Americans, to the Brits, to the Germans, the Italians, the Japanese. They made a fortune off of World War II. A week before the war was over, they declared war on Germany and Japan and said, see, we were on your side, Americans, the whole time. We're on the good side. Second highest gold standard. Perón rose to power after World War II. The guy was a fascist, kind of a semi-Nazi kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he came into power and basically they had a very small upper class, very small middle class, huge lower class in Argentina. He empowered the lower class and said, we're gonna take over all the British corporations that have invested in Argentina. He confiscated them all. The upper class said, whoa, they started getting a lot of pressure. They tried to put him in prison. They got him out. His wife rose to power, obviously just made her way up. People can watch the video and see how she did that, but she got to the point where she's next to the future president of them, and he basically became a dictator effectively there in Argentina. But my mom remembers as a kid, my grandfather was a farmer in Argentina at that time, owned hundreds of acres that he had saved for in Spain, moved to Argentina, bought land, went back to Spain, worked some more, and kept buying it, and then eventually moved there and ran his own farm. The government came in and says, hey, why don't you join our party? Be a Peronista. We can make all this money off of it. My grandfather said, no way. I don't agree with your beliefs. I can't do it. They eventually started giving the money away that they had made after World War II, and they would go to schools and they go into elementary schools. Hey, are you a Peronista? Are you with us? Yes. Here's a bicycle for you. Here's a doll for you. You're not. You don't get anything. You get this gift. All kinds of toys to all the kids. So yeah, we're with you. Where you get free stuff from the government. They go knocking on doors. Hi, are you a Peronista? Here's a bottle of wine and a chicken, courtesy of the Argentinian government. Thank you for supporting us and our party and our views. If you don't, they had you on the list. After they ran out of money, right? We got to find food. We got to find stuff. They go to the farmers out in the sticks in Argentina and say, we got to take your crops because people of the country need it. And they confiscate. They just come in and harvest your crops without your permission, take all your work, and they wouldn't give you anything for it. My grandfather saw that happen and said, forget this. I'm going to harvest early, bury it all in the ground so they can't find it. And they showed up and said, hey, you had a bunch of corn out here? Yeah, I had a fire. We know you. You're like, And they eventually went to him and said, you're going to sell us your land for this price, or we're going to basically take you and your family out. So he sold what he had, what he could. He wanted to survive, went to the city. They came to hang him at his house twice, to hang him from town square because he wasn't informed. He had to hide in a space in the attic. My mother said they came in and ransacked the house twice over. This is how the world is in most other parts of the world, right? This is the kind of
This is
people
why
that
people
endure.
come to America.
Exactly. So you see that kind of junk happen. The military came involved in Argentina. After all that stuff happened, Perón eventually ran out of money, ran out of resources, and said, we're going to start charging income tax. People said, income tax? They took him and they kicked him out of the country. The military took over in Argentina and controlled things very well for a while, but again, they violated a lot of civil rights. If you were even sniffed of you might have robbed somebody, you disappear and you were gone. So after that happened, here comes the rise of democracy there again, and the way they handle their inflation is they reset they get to about 1 million pesos for $1. Let's just cut off 5 zeros and make it 100, or make it a 1 for 1, and you watch the thing continue to inflate. But confiscating, all that wealth, it destroyed that country. It's destroyed it, and they still haven't recovered since World War II. because they kind of eat themselves on that stuff, and their governments have been so corrupt, and they've had so much junk happen there. I would not follow Argentina's lead when it comes to economic recoveries. And mind you, my aunt is a professor of economics at a university in Argentina, a rather prominent one, and she knows it's a disaster over there, the way things have been handled. So I can't, it would be a bad idea. Capitalism works because it gives, that's what makes America great, is you can be, it doesn't matter what the station of your birth is or where you started, you can achieve great things in this country. You take that opportunity away, I mean, then that's what America was about. And ultimately, you're going to either do that, or you're going to either concentrate the wealth and the power into government, which is what we don't want to see happen, or into very, very few, and you create an oligarchy where just a few people control all of the happenings in the country. That's a dangerous place to go. It should give everybody that same opportunity is what we need to keep doing here. You got me riled up on Argentina, man. That's a bad economic model.
Well, that's about an hour. I think it's probably a pretty good show.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being here, Rob.
No problem. You guys got me fired up today. This is good.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your service to our state.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me here.